and for a moment, he wondered if he'd even have the strength to open it. What he didn't know was that in less than an hour, that bottle would be empty, and it wouldn't be him who drank it. Callum had been alone on this stretch of land for almost a decade, built the house himself, cleared the brush, dug the well. The nearest town sat 3 days' ride to the east, and he preferred it that way. Fewer questions, fewer expectations, fewer people looking at him with that mixture of pity and judgment he'd grown tired of reading in their eyes. The fever started small, a little heat behind his forehead, nothing worth worrying about. By the second day, his hands shook so badly he could barely hold a cup steady. By the third day, he knew this wasn't passing on its own. He'd made the trip to town 6 weeks back, traded good money for 3 bottles of medicine from the physician who'd set up shop above the general store, used 2 bottles already for a cough that tried to settle in his chest last month. This was the last one, his last chance. Callum pushed himself up from the bed, legs unsteady beneath him. The room tilted slightly, but he forced himself forward, had to get water, had to take the medicine while he still had the clarity to measure it properly. He moved through the small house, one hand on the wall for balance, making his way toward the front door where he kept a bucket of fresh well water on the porch. That's when he saw her. A woman lay crumpled on his porch, halfway between the steps and his front door. Her traditional dress, adorned with intricate beadwork and long fringe, marked her as native to these lands. The morning sun caught the silver of her earrings, the only thing about her that moved as a slight breeze passed through. Callum froze in the doorway, bottle still clutched in his hand. She wasn't moving. He took a step closer, his fever-addled mind trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Had she collapsed there? How long had she been lying on his porch? Her face was turned away from him, dark hair spread across the weathered wood, but even from where he stood, he could see the unnatural stillness of her body. Then he saw the rise and fall of her back, shallow, irregular, but breathing. Callum knelt beside her, his own weakness making the movement awkward. He reached out, touched her shoulder gently. Her skin burned beneath the fabric of her dress. Hotter than his, hotter than seemed possible. She didn't respond to his touch, didn't open her eyes, didn't make a sound. He looked at the bottle in his hand, then back at the woman dying on his porch. His mind raced through impossible calculations. The medicine in this bottle was measured for 1 person, 1 treatment. There wasn't enough for 2. Callum felt his own fever surging, felt the weakness in his limbs, felt the way his vision blurred at the edges. He knew what his body needed, knew what would happen if he didn't take this medicine soon. But looking at her, at the way her breathing caught and stuttered, at the deathly pallor beneath her sun-touched skin, he knew something else too. She wouldn't last until morning without help, and neither would he. His hand tightened around the bottle, and for the first time in 3 days, the fever wasn't the thing that made him shake. Callum's father used to say that a man's character showed clearest when nobody was watching. Sitting on that porch, bottle in one hand, the other resting on the shoulder of a dying stranger, Callum understood what the old man meant. Nobody would ever know what happened here. The nearest soul was days away. He could take the medicine, and this woman would simply be another person who didn't make it through the harsh realities of frontier life. His hand moved to uncork the bottle. His body screamed for it. Every muscle ached. His vision swam. The fever had progressed to the point where he could feel his thoughts beginning to scatter like frightened birds. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way her breathing hitched, shallow and desperate. Maybe it was seeing someone worse off than himself. Maybe it was just that after 10 years of isolation, of choosing solitude over community, of building walls instead of bridges, he was tired of being the kind of man who could walk away. Callum looked at the woman's face, really looked at her for the first time. She was young, 18, maybe 19 at most. The intricate beadwork on her dress spoke of skill and care, someone who was valued, who would be missed. Her braided hair had come partially loose, strands sticking to her fevered face. He made his decision before he could think about it too long. Callum lifted her head gently, cradling it in the crook of his arm. She was lighter than he expected, or maybe he was weaker than he wanted to admit. Her eyes fluttered but didn't open. He uncorked the bottle with his teeth, the bitter smell of the medicine sharp in the morning air. Getting her to swallow was harder. Most of it ran down her chin at first. He tried again, tilting her head back slightly, speaking to her even though she couldn't hear him. "Come on, you have to swallow. Come on." Some instinct in her responded. Her throat worked. Once, twice. The medicine went down. Callum gave her the entire bottle, every drop. The part of his mind still capable of basic arithmetic knew he was signing his own death warrant. That medicine was carefully measured. The physician had been clear about dosage. 1 bottle, 1 person, taken over the course of a day. He'd just given it all to someone who might not even survive to see sunset. When the bottle was empty, he set it down on the porch beside them and carefully lowered her head back to the wooden boards. His hands shook worse now, whether from the fever or from what he'd just done. He couldn't tell. Callum tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. He sat down hard, back against the porch post, the woman lying a few feet away. The sun was climbing higher. It would be a hot day. He could already feel it. His eyes grew heavy. The fever wrapped around him like a thick blanket, pulling him down into a darkness that felt almost welcoming. His last conscious thought was wondering if they'd find their bodies here. 2 strangers who died on the same porch for different reasons. But as his eyes closed, he didn't see the woman's fingers twitch, didn't see her chest rise with a slightly deeper breath, didn't see the first sign that the medicine was beginning to work, didn't see her eyes open, just a sliver before his world went black. Aita's first conscious thought was pain. It filled every corner of her body, a deep ache that seemed to come from her bones themselves. Her second thought was confusion. The wooden boards beneath her cheek were wrong, unfamiliar. Not the smooth leather of her family's dwelling, not the woven mats she'd known her entire life. She forced her eyes open. The midday sun so bright it felt like needles. She was on a porch, a stranger's porch. The house behind her was simple, weathered wood with a fresh coat of white paint, the kind settlers built when they claimed land that didn't belong to them. Aita tried to piece together how she'd gotten here. She remembered the fever starting yesterday morning, remembered her father, Tahatan, making her drink bitter tea that did nothing to break the heat consuming her from within. Remembered walking, desperate for cool water, following the creek bed that led away from their camp. After that, everything became fragments, collapsing. The wooden steps beneath her hands, the blessed shade of a porch roof. She turned her head, the movement sending waves of dizziness through her, and saw him. A man slumped against the porch post, head tilted at an unnatural angle, shirt dark with sweat. His breathing was loud in the quiet afternoon. Each inhale a ragged struggle. Even from several feet away, she could see the violent tremor running through his limbs. He was burning up, worse than she had been. Aita's eyes traveled to the empty glass bottle lying on its side between them. She recognized the shape. Trade medicine, the kind the traveling physicians sold in the settlements. Her people rarely trusted such things, preferring their own remedies. But she'd seen these bottles before. Understanding came slowly, through the fog still clouding her mind. She touched her own forehead, still warm, but nothing like before. The fever that had been consuming her had broken, or at least retreated to something manageable. This man, this stranger, had given her his medicine. All of it, judging by the empty bottle. Aita pushed herself to sitting, her body protesting every movement. The beadwork on her dress caught the light, the careful patterns her mother had taught her to make. Patterns that told stories, that marked her family, that connected her to something older than the settlements spreading across the land. She looked at the man again. He needed help, needed it desperately. But she was alone here, miles from her father's camp, barely able to sit upright herself. The nearest settlement was days away. Even if she could ride, she didn't see a horse. Just an empty corral beside the house, the fence post standing silent sentinel. Her father would know what to do. Tahatan had knowledge passed down through generations, plants and roots and treatments the settlers had never heard of. But he was too far away. By the time she could make it back to camp, this man would be dead. Aita touched the empty bottle again, turned it over in her hands. Why had he done it? She was nobody to him. A stranger. Her people and his had never been allies. The history between them was written in broken treaties and burned villages, and suspicion that ran deep as roots. Yet he'd saved her life. She struggled to her feet, had to grab the porch railing to keep from falling. Her legs felt like water, but she forced them to hold her weight. She moved to where the man sat, crouched beside him. His face was slack with unconsciousness, skin flushed with dangerous heat. She placed her hand on his forehead and pulled it back immediately. He was burning alive from the inside. Aita knew enough about fever to understand what she was seeing. He had hours at most, maybe less. Her mind raced through what she knew, what her father had taught her, what plants grew in this region, what treatments were possible with what she could find nearby. It wasn't much, wasn't nearly enough, but maybe, just maybe, there was one option left. She would have to leave him, would have to ride through the afternoon heat, through terrain that would test her even at full strength, would have to pray that her father hadn't moved camp, would have to pray that she could find her way back before this stranger's fever took what remained of his life. Aita looked at the man one last time, at the face of someone who'd chosen her life over his own, and made her decision. Aita moved through the stranger's property with purpose she didn't quite feel. Every step required concentration. Her body wanted to collapse back onto that porch, wanted to surrender to the weakness still coursing through her veins. But the image of the man's fever-ravaged face kept her moving. She found the barn behind the house, a modest structure that had seen better years. The door hung slightly crooked on its hinges. Inside, the air was thick with heat and the smell of old hay. Her eyes adjusted to the dimness, searching for what she hoped would be there. A single horse stood in the back stall, a gray mare with intelligent eyes that tracked Aita's movements. The animal looked well-fed, healthy. Beside the stall hung a simple saddle and bridle, leather cracked, but serviceable. Aita approached slowly, hand extended. The mare snorted but didn't shy away. Good. She couldn't afford to waste time chasing a skittish animal. Her hands trembled as she lifted the saddle. It was heavier than she remembered things being. The fever had stolen more of her strength than she wanted to admit. Getting the saddle onto the mare took 3 attempts. By the third, Aita's arms burned and her vision swam. She leaned against the stall wall, breathing hard, forcing her body to cooperate. The horse waited patiently, as if sensing the desperation of the moment. When she finally led the mare out into the afternoon sun, Aita had to stop and orient herself. The creek bed she'd followed earlier should run north from here, follow it upstream, and she'd find familiar markers. From there, she could navigate to where her father's group had camped 3 days ago. If they'd moved, she'd have to track them, time she didn't have. Mounting the horse required using a fence post for leverage. Even then, she nearly fell twice before managing to swing her leg over. Once seated, she allowed herself 10 seconds to catch her breath, then turned the mare toward the creek. The ride became a blur of endurance. The sun burned overhead, and Aita had left without water or supplies. Her dress, still damp with the sweat of her fever, offered little protection. The mare moved at a steady pace, but every jolt sent waves of nausea through Aita's stomach. She recognized the twisted cottonwood first, its trunk split by lightning years ago. Then the red rocks jutting from the hillside like broken teeth. Her people had camped near here countless times, moving with the seasons, following water and game. The landmarks were as familiar as her own face. The sun had moved considerably by the time she spotted the thin column of smoke rising in the distance. Her heart lurched with relief so intense it was almost painful. They were still there. Her father was still there. Aita urged the mare faster, though the animal was already exhausted. They crested a low rise, and she could see the camp spread below. 4 dwellings arranged in a loose circle, horses grazing nearby, a small fire burning at the center. Home. She recognized her father immediately. Tahatan stood near the fire, speaking with 2 other men. Even from this distance, she could see the way he held himself, the quiet authority that came not from volume but from respect earned over decades. Aita tried to call out, but her voice came as barely a whisper. She urged the mare down the slope, and movement caught her father's eye. He turned, saw her, and the conversation stopped mid-sentence. She watched his expression change as she drew closer, saw him register her weakened state, her borrowed horse, the desperation written across her features.